Great to see everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're just going to give everyone a couple of minutes to get comfortable and get logged in. So in the meantime, it would be so lovely if in the chat you shared where you're based today. And for you, in terms of Microsoft, what's going well and what are you perhaps struggling with, or what are your teams struggling with? And it would be lovely to share that information. So I'll go first. My name's Dee. I'm based in central London today. What's going well for me with Microsoft Teams is the planner feature, and that's something I'm really excited to share today. Lee, over to you while people are...
I'm Lee, also from the Think Productive team. I'm one of the productivity ninjas, so I deliver workshops. I'm dialing in today from North Somerset, where the weather is gloomy and rough. And what's going well for me in Microsoft? I'm enjoying the ability to react to an email rather than have to send yet another reply to send things back. And where I'm struggling, I've got my skills in MS To Do pretty ninja style now. I'm still on the learning for MS Planner, I think. So I'm looking forward to continuing to build that side of things up as well. And we got Vicky has kicked off in the chat, which is fantastic. That confirms that we are seen and heard. So Vicky's joining from the University of Essex in Colchester. Going well. I'm using it. There you go. Excellent. Yeah. Struggling with managing perhaps multiple inboxes as well. And Alex is joining from London, where works in the events business. Feels like there's a lot of great functionality that I'm not aware of, fumbling around and a bit out of date. I suspect, Alex, you won't be the only person who maybe feels a little bit like that. That's why we are very keen to bring this session to people as well. We're creeping up to the high 70s now, Dee, with people joining. If somebody can just give us a final tech reassurance in the chat that you can see and hear both me and Dee, and that you can see the slide, and then Dee will kick us off, I think, very soon. Mark, welcome from the Environment Agency. Great to see people from the agency here. You're one of my clients. Really pleased that you've joined us. And Sarah is coming in from the West Midlands, and we've got University of Bristol, also a client as well. Lauren says, using Planner, but not to its full potential, I suspect. Struggling to prioritize. So yeah, some key themes about, like, I know some things. I know there's some things I don't know, but I'm not sure what those are. And also I'm a little bit confused or overwhelmed with some of the features and stuff like that. So if your feeling is anything like that, you are here in the right session today.
Yeah, you're in the right place, that's for sure. Well, thank you. Please, if you're still typing, that's fine. Don't feel that you're too late. Okay, let's kick off. So welcome to Microsoft Mastery for People Professionals. So if you haven't been to one of our People Professionals webinars before, you're so welcome. We've always run a series of webinars for participants, but we thought it was about time we ran something for people professionals, because often you guys are the people who put yourself last when it comes to booking on training. You're always worried so much about everyone else. So we wanted something just for you. And we also wanted to give you a bit of a window, a behind the scenes peek at what we do here at Think Productive, because we'd love to work with you in your organizations too. So lots of you, I know I can see familiar names, but in case you haven't worked with us before, we're Think Productive, and we essentially help people get their best work done. We help teams, organizations with leadership, core skills, productivity, and you can see there some of the things that we really value, particularly how we walk our talk. All the things we're going to be showing you today are things that we live and breathe every day. So we've got quite a packed agenda today. So today's agenda are elements of our Microsoft for Productivity Ninja workshop. So I've taken some of those elements. Lee and I had a bit of a chat about what could really benefit people professionals. And we're giving you a bit of a taster. In 40 minutes or so, we're not going to be able to do all the kind of demos and things that we'd do in a full day session. But we want to give you some really good tips and takeaways that you can go away and share with your team and hopefully investigate further. So we're kicking off with something that we hear about an awful lot, and that is a bit of confusion between OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint. So when we go into organizations and we deliver Microsoft for Productivity Ninjas, this is often something that comes up. What should I be using them for? What's the difference between them? So we thought we'd start by a bit of an explanation, just to make sure that you've got a really good explanation that you can share with people in your teams as well. So in TP style, we're going to bring it to life for you. So I'd like you to start by imagining up in the cloud, there is a warehouse full of cabinets, and they're all kind of empty. They haven't quite been activated yet. But one of them has been activated. And this is your OneDrive. So all these blue folders form part of SharePoint. And SharePoint is this unlimited filing cabinet where you can share your resources, your files, your documents, and you can create as many as you need. But one has already been created for each Microsoft 365 subscriber, and that is your OneDrive. So if you were to go to a Microsoft 365 online and go to your OneDrive app, you'll see that in this case, this is Joe's OneDrive is already created for you. But the key is that your OneDrive lives in SharePoint. That's where it's backed up. Now stay with me while I just bring you into a Microsoft team, and you'll see how they all piece together. So think of this as your virtual team. If you're creating a Microsoft team, it's because you want to bring a group of people virtually together in the same space. And that's what you do when you create a team. So you might say, right, we are an HR team. There's 5 of us, and we need a virtual Teams space. And when you create a space, you automatically get a place you can meet. Well, that's the meeting table. And you get a place where you can write each other notes and chat together. Well, that's the chat feature in Microsoft Teams, and you can see that there on the whiteboard. But there's something else you automatically get when you create a Microsoft Teams space. You automatically get a place to store some files as well. And that is actually backed up on SharePoint. So SharePoint is the backdoor to everything. Teams doesn't have the ability to save its own files, so it borrows one of those cabinets from SharePoint. So that's why if you ever go into SharePoint from your Microsoft 365 online, you will not only have a SharePoint created for every single Teams that you've ever been invited to, you'll also have the opportunity to create as many more filing cabinets as you need. The difference is some of them are created automatically in Teams and some of them aren't. And there's a bit of confusion around, well, what should I be setting up? So what I would say is, as a rule of thumb, with OneDrive, that really should be a place where you only save things that your colleagues are not going to need if you were to go off sick. If there's anything in there that your colleagues might need if you were off, then it shouldn't be in there. So for example, I keep in there, you can see there, that's mine. I've got expenses. That's just a record of expenses and receipts and invoices. I also keep my pay slips in there as well. But I would never keep anything that my colleagues would need potentially, because that's my personal filing cabinet. and you can create as many folders and files within your OneDrive as you need. So that's a good place to store personal files. What's also nice about OneDrive is you can share with other people. So if you do have something in your OneDrive and you just want a colleague to glance over it before you kind of finalize it and share it centrally, you can use the share button and they'll be able to see it and add comments as well. SharePoint. So this is a place, this is the opposite of OneDrive. So OneDrive are the things that are just for you, whereas SharePoint is a place where you would store all your centralized files and folders and documents. And you can set up different rules. So you can set up SharePoint sites that only specific people have access to. And even within that, you can set up different folders that different people have access to as well. So you might have everybody has access to this particular site, but it contains 5 folders and not everyone has access to all those folders. But it means it's safe, it's stored up in the cloud, it's backed up, and people can see it. So it's not those kind of private folders in OneDrive. And there's 2 ways you can do a SharePoint site. You can do a very basic site where it's literally just a filing cabinet, a place for you to store your documents and your folders, or you can create a SharePoint site that is much more bells and whistles. But what I would say, if you're going to look to create something a bit more like what you're seeing on the screen, that really does take a bit of a SharePoint expert. And it also needs updating, because the minute you start putting things on there like newsletters and updates, which you can do as well as all your files and folders, the minute that becomes out of date, people will lose trust in it. So my recommendation is, unless you've got someone really committed and kind of skilled to put a SharePoint site together, stick with the very basic, because that's all you need to keep all your files safely. Okay, Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft Teams, as we've said, is a place where you're bringing a group of teams, a group of individuals together as a team. So my rule of thumb is you would only create a team with a specific purpose. So you wouldn't bring 5 or 6 people together in a Microsoft team unless there was a real purpose for them being there. You want them to have a reason for having that team. You wouldn't pull someone into a meeting without a purpose. So you might say, look, we're an HR team, there's 5 of us, we're going to create a Microsoft Teams so that we can work together, support our colleagues. It's got a real purpose. It's not just a place where you're going to share documents, because if it's just for sharing documents, you're better off using SharePoint. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into Teams. And hopefully when I'm talking about a purpose, this will be a bit clearer.
I've just invited people, Dee, to use the chat and the Q&A to send any
Perfect.
questions that are coming in as you're talking.
Yeah.
I also feel personally, having suffered the same kind of confusion that you're doing such a wonderful job of clearing up in the past, I think it's unfortunate that the name of the software, Microsoft Teams, with an S on it, is also the name of the functional collective area of which you can have many inside of it, a
Yes.
team. I wish they'd picked some slightly differentiatable names, because I think we might not. And then, of course, we refer to having a virtual meeting inside the software as meeting each other on a Teams brackets
Yes.
call as well.
Yes.
So it's no wonder that people have got themselves in a knot.
Yeah.
We have our first Q&A panel question,
Go
which
for
came
it.
in, which is fantastic. We're being asked, why is SharePoint better than Teams for just sharing files?
I guess I guess it depends on what you're trying to do. So first of all, Teams doesn't share its own files. It backs it up on SharePoint. So when you're saving into Teams, actually you're saving into SharePoint at the back end. So if you were to go into SharePoint, you'll see that you've already got your filing cabinet set up for every team you're in. So it really depends on internally whether or not you need the rest of Teams. So if you need a place to store files, meet, chat, do project plans, then use Teams. If you're only going to use the files and you only want a place to store files, then it doesn't matter doing it on Teams, but you may as well just do it in SharePoint because you don't need all the other stuff. And actually, if you save just files in a team, you might confuse people because they might start using the chat function. And actually, if all you want them to do is access files, you probably don't want people having to check the chat and having to check emails. Better just not to have the chat.
I like your metaphor. So if it was we're just using SharePoint as a shared file store for multiple people, it's like a big library or warehouse that we can all just wander in and out of as we like, just to get the stuff. Whereas the team, as you're about to go on, is, well, we've got this little collaborative space now where not only can we see files that have been made available to that team, but we can do all the other things that you're just about to tell us about as well. So the working out what you want to use it for seems to be step one. Cool. No other pending questions, so please carry on. Oh, no, we do. Sorry. And you may be covering this in what you're about to move on to, but Emily asks, would you suggest having a team for each project being worked on where there are multiple ideas and things needing to be shared? What happens to everything when that project is finished and a team is no longer needed?
I'm going to show you maybe something else, because my suggestion would be to use a channel rather than a team. So hopefully in 2 slides time, I'm going to answer that question for you. And when I'm saying channel, you'll know what I mean. So can I come back to that one, Lee?
Perfect. I knew you were going to that. So that's why I said you might want to answer that in a minute. Carry on.
Perfect. Okay, so a team brings together people in one place. So 5 or 6 people in your HR team. And you can see there, I'm personally in 3 teams. One that is Think Productive HQ, which is just for those of us who work in headquarters. And then I'm in another team, which is HQ with our Master Ninjas. And the third team I'm in is just a demo team that I use to show people things. So I'm not in very many teams at all, but that doesn't mean we haven't got lots of projects and exciting things going on, because within each team, you have different channels. And this is where a lot of people end up with 50, 60, 70, 80 teams, because they're setting up a new team when actually they could just use a new channel. So let's say in the HR team, they're working on a massive conference. It's huge. It needs conversation. It needs a plan. It needs bringing 3 of those 5 people together in one place. So we just add a channel to the HR team, but we just invite the 3 people that we need. And let's say that same HR team needs a whole channel for recruitment. Well, you don't need a whole Microsoft team for recruitment. You just make it a channel. They're like your sub teams within your team. So the rule is, if you've invited 5 people into your team, you can pick from those 5 who goes into what channel. It can be all of them, or it can just be part of them. And within every channel, you get the same thing. You get a place for posts, a place for files. So I would suggest, rather than a new team for every project, just establish a really good team structure and then decide which projects you need. And then if, for example, you've got one called Conference 2024 and that finishes, you can either archive it or you could just turn it into 2025, because you probably want the same stuff in it for next year. And then the last strand, the last layer, is the tabs. So within each channel, you've got the tab function and you can add, there's a little add there. And there's lots of things that you can add to help you achieve whatever it is that you're trying to achieve in that channel. And when you click on that add, it gives you lots of different options of things that you can add. So you could add a PowerPoint or an Excel sheet or a Microsoft OneNote. And there are also lots of third-party apps and things you can add as well. Some of them are paid for, some of them are not. And there's one thing that I wanted to show you that I think is the most useful thing you can add onto a channel tab. And that brings us on to our third stop today, which is adding a Microsoft Planner to Teams.
Dee, can I just bring in two questions,
Yeah.
like to finish this section? So you've answered almost all of Emily's question. I think I also heard you say that channels can be archived at the end of a project.
Yeah.
Can channels be rescued from archive and unarchived?
I
I'm
believe
assuming
so.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Raymond asks, where should supervision notes be kept? In OneNote, where presumably they would be private to that person, that manager, or in SharePoint, but with a limit on who can access it?
I would say that it requires a bit of a conversation and a bit of a plan. I would say, I would recommend starting with a really big piece of paper and marker pens and do yourself a bit of a, right, what are the things everyone needs to see? What are the things some people need to see? And design a folder structure. So you might have a folder structure that has appraisal documents in that only your senior leadership team can access. Or you might decide that every individual senior leader has their own folder within SharePoint, because in case they go off sick, someone else does need to be able to see it. And you just put the people you line manage in there. It depends whether you want them all in one folder from everyone across the company, or that's going to be a much different level of permission. But I would suggest starting with a big piece of paper and just planning who needs what. And whoever does your admin for Microsoft 365, they'll be able to do all your permissions for you. So depending how well supported you are, when I worked in an international school a few years ago, we designed a folder structure that said senior leaders need to see this, and middle leaders need to see this, and teachers need to see this. And we gave it to our head of IT. He created it all and did the permissions for us.
Great. Elena's come in with some thoughts on the same thing as well, which are kind of along the same lines. One quick one, which you may defer to later. Within a channel, can you change the order of the tabs? Lauren has the posts tab come up first as the default on one particular channel, but they actually use the files tab most often. Can you remove the post tabs, or can you change the order?
Yeah, the only one you can't, what you can't do is you can't take away the general channel from a team, and that's because you can't have a team without a channel in it. I've honestly never tried. I've removed tabs before by right-clicking on them. I've never tried to change the order of them.
Well, there you go, Lauren. There's a thing to have a fiddle with after the session, and
Yeah.
we'll have our contact details out. And if you're still exploring, we can have a look into it as well. And at the very least, confirm no, you can't, and stuff like that. Sarah has said, pretty sure you can now rename the general channel.
Yeah.
Anyway, I know you've got some lovely planner stuff to show us, Dee. So
that's
I will
great.
keep watching questions, but
Yeah, please do, Lee. So what I would say in terms of your teams is just have a bit of a conversation. What teams do we need? Do we need to have a bit of a tidy up? Have we made teams when we need to use channels? And actually, if any of you were to go on to invite us to come in and deliver Microsoft for Productivity Ninja for your team or your organization, we spend part of the day doing this. We help you map it all out. In our workbook, there's a place for you to do some planning. What teams do we need? What channels do we need? Who has access for what to what? And we help you work through that, because I know it can be a bit of a minefield. So in terms of Microsoft Planner, so Microsoft Planner is an app on its own, and you might have seen that in the app launcher on Microsoft 365. Every time you make a Microsoft Planner, it automatically makes a SharePoint site for it, which is a bit frustrating. But if you actually put a Microsoft Planner in a Teams tab, it doesn't do that because Teams is already backed by SharePoint. And it's a really great way of saying, right, we're together in this channel. We've got this project we're working on. Let's use Microsoft Planner to get our best work done. If you were to book us for Microsoft for Productivity Ninjas, you get access to loads and loads of videos and how to. So I wanted to include one of our videos in today's session just to give you a taster. Yeah, so this is a 5-minute video on Microsoft Planner in Teams.
And it'll still be Dee's voice. It will be almost like you're narrating it live, but you're not. And whilst the video is playing, please do add any further questions either into the Q&A panel or the chat, and I will feed as many to Dee as we have time for.
By inserting a Microsoft Planner inside the tab of a Teams channel, you can work collaboratively to plan and track the progress of projects. So let's add one together. Add a tab, Tasks by Planner. It's going to ask you to give it a name. So I'm going to call this one Internal Conference, because that's what we're planning together as a team, our company conference. And I'm going to press Save. Now, the first thing you'll see are the buckets. Now, a bucket is a category that separates your to-do list of all the things you need to do for your project. So I'm going to begin by deleting the standard ones because I'd like to create my own. So the first stage is going to be the planning stage. That's when we're going to do all the logistics. The next stage is dealing with all the invitations and the guest lists and make sure we're inviting the right people and tracking their replies. The third stage is going to be the final check stage, and the last stage is going to be our reviewing stage, where we look at the success of the conference that will help with our planning for next year. So the first thing we're going to do is add some tasks. So let's do one task in the planning stage. We need to pick a venue, and let's make a due date, and let's assign that. Now all the members of your channel will come up as options for you to assign that task to. Because this is a demo channel, there's only one option. And let's do another task for the invitation stage. Let's create a task for our guest list. And then in the final checks, we're going to want to reconfirm with our caterer and make sure everything's on track. And then in the review stage, we're going to want to generate our evaluation so we can send that to all the participants who attended our conference. So you can put in together as a team all the tasks and all the people it's assigned to and by what date. Now, there are a few other things you can do with a task. You can add a label, you can add a priority, If it's something you need to repeat twice, you can add it as a repetitive task. You can do a start and a due date rather than just the due date, and you can type in any notes or attachments that whoever's doing that task would find really useful. It's also worth noting that whenever something is assigned here, it goes straight to their Microsoft To Do, and if they mark it as complete within To Do, it automatically lists as done here, and it goes into your completed tasks. Likewise, if you were to change the date here, it would change in your Microsoft To Do as well. And you can add more than one person's name when you assign it if someone needs to work on it with a colleague. And there are different ways you can look at this. You can look as a list, a chart, so you can track your priority and how many things you've done, or you can look at it as a calendar view. It's also worth knowing that Planner is actually its own app too. So you can come in at it through the app launcher, the Waffle, and you can make new plans, and you can also see together all the plans you have and everything that's been assigned to you in lots and lots of different plans, so you can help with your prioritization. It's also in To Do as well, but this is just another way of viewing it.
Hey, you've got space for 2 quick questions, Dee?
Oh, yes.
So a couple of people were reporting that the screen of the video is a bit blurry, but I'm hoping on the YouTube watch back it'll be crisper. If you're desperate to see that video in its full glory, get in touch, we'll find a way. So I think you might have answered Emily's question. Emily was going, would you go as far as using a tab with a planner in it if there were only 2 people working on a project? Because at the moment, they're maybe just using chat to coordinate between the 2. I'm assuming the answer is yes, there would be advantages.
Yeah, to me, the measuring tape wouldn't be the amount of people, it would be the amount of tasks. So I wouldn't do a whole planner if it was something we were just doing for a week and it was 5 or 6 things. But if it was even if it was just 2 of you planning that conference with all those bits and pieces, then yes, I would create one.
Cool. And then maybe just for now, and I know I've got other questions coming in, we'll try and add them on at the end. Making the choice between using a planner or using Microsoft To Do, and perhaps you could just say a tiny bit about how they automatically talk to each other anyway, which makes it all very simple.
Yeah, so it's really personal choice. So if you don't know what Microsoft To Do is, book our course. We'd love to show you. It's a brilliant way of Microsoft integrating everything into one to-do list for you. Essentially, as a personal preference, I use Microsoft To Do for just things I'm working on. I use Microsoft Planner with my team for things we're working on together, but there's no rule, whatever works for you.
And if you have a task assigned to you from a planner, it shows in your To Do.
It does.
So
yeah, it does.
It just works. It's fantastic. Cool. I'm going to pick the best of the remaining questions, but I'll let you carry on.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. Thanks for all your questions. That's brilliant. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to just highlight to you in case you didn't already know, because you guys are people professionals, you might be in teams that essentially have to approve lots of things, and Microsoft has an app that can help with that. It's an add-on in Teams, or you can also get it from the app launcher. And essentially, there's 2 ways you can use Microsoft approvals. You can ask someone to approve something one-off. So I might send an email to someone and say, I might send an approval to one person and say, could you sign off this document for me before it goes to print? Personally, I might do that in an email rather than in approvals, but technically you can. The way I think approvals is so useful is that you can essentially create templates, and it gives you some templates to start with. So holiday approval, annual leave approval, overtime approval, anything that lots of people require approval for, you can create a template and a hyperlink for. So rather than people asking for things like annual leave via email, you can create an approval form, and essentially you can set it up behind the scenes that you say, when someone fills in this form, it goes to this person. So that could be an HR manager or someone else in your team, and they get an email to say someone's asked you for approval. They click into it, they either approve it or not, and then the person who put in the approval gets a notification as well. So just a hidden feature that not a lot of people know about, that is so, I think, so great for people professionals, and can just cut down on email traffic, I think. Although you do get the notifications, that's not quite the same as a long-winded email that you then have to read through. So that is the penultimate thing I wanted to show you. And that brings us on just to some last features. Particularly those of us who work in people professional, it's so important that everything we do, we all know we're thinking about inclusivity. And I just wanted to draw your attention to some really great features within Microsoft that you might not need, but other people in your team might find really useful. So firstly, you may not know this, but there is a read aloud feature within Microsoft. So wherever you see that little button, that little read aloud, it will read it to you. So it's great if you're on the train and you get travel sick and you want someone to read it to you, but it's also really great for those of us who might have just a bit of a barrier. Not all of us can take in long-winded documents, and we prefer to have it read to us. Also, if you're dyslexic and sometimes you can struggle with expression, I use this sometimes. If I've written something and I want to check it makes sense, I get Word to read it back to me, and then that just helps me hear if there's something that I've made as a mistake, and I can put it right.
Personal request from me: if you're listening to it on the train, please wear headphones.
Yes.
Especially if you're in the quiet carriage.
Yeah, and you can see the same feature is in email as well. So if you've got people in your organization who you think would benefit from this, or yourselves, please do share it with them. And then you've also got a dictate feature as well. And what's nice about the dictate feature is you can ask it to include punctuation or not. So again, if you're someone who is much better at saying than writing, then you can dictate it. And then I would always recommend, once you've dictated it, you have Word read it back to you, just to check that they've got what you said right. But this is, again, really great for people who perhaps struggle with expression and just getting their ideas down on paper. Also really good if you know, you might be on a walker or something and you want to multitask, or even if you're going out for a walk or something. Although if you're going out for a walk, you wouldn't have your laptop. No, scrap that. But really great feature, really inclusive. And then the last thing is, I wanted to show you that within Microsoft, you can also check accessibility as well. So if you use the check accessibility button, if you don't see it, you can pop it in the search. It will just give you an idea of whether you've hit certain checkpoints, and there's no bias in your writing. So particularly policies and things that are going to be circulated company-wide, this is a really good way of just checking. Okay, so we've got to the end of our stops, and I do appreciate that that's a lot of information for how many minutes? 38 minutes. But hopefully it's given you a bit of a taster, and yeah, and you're hungry for more. And if you are hungry for more, I just wanted to let you know that we do this as a full day, as a 6-hour workshop. So if you did want to chat about it, please drop us an email. And you can see there's a QR code that will let you know all the things that are in that session. We normally have a kind of extra questions bit at the end. So if you do
I've got plenty of questions for you, Dee.
So let me get to the end, because then in case people don't want to hear all the questions, they've heard all these bits as well, the wrap up. So we've also got some more sessions coming up for our People Professional series. The next one is Lee in November.
Woohoo!
Yay!
Excited, but you're helping me.
I am helping you, yeah. We're switching for that one.
Yeah.
So that's Inbox Mastery. And then we've got one coming up on feedback and then emotional intelligence as well. So really great topics that we hope will really help you guys and your teams.
Yeah, if your people are feeling, or your people are feeling crushed by email overload, come next month. We've got plenty of thoughts on that. It's my favorite one.
And then something to share with anyone in your organizations who aren't people professionals. We have some general webinars as well, and we've got some great ones coming up. We've got another one coming up on Microsoft. That's more general, kind of less aimed at people professionals, and just some really great tips and tricks. And we've got one on prioritization as well. So please do share those links internally. We'd love to see lots of your people there. And just before I hand over to Lee to pick out some questions, please do keep in touch. You've got my email address, LinkedIn. If you wanted a bit of a chat more about this session or any others, please keep a note of my email, and I'd love to hear from you.